Hi, howdy, how's it going? Today we're going to talk about natural selection, and basically you might know natural selection as survival of the fittest. You might have heard that before, and it's just one way that evolution can take place. So it's just a way that an animal or plant species or any living species can change over a period of time. So we're going to go through natural selection here. Two main things that we're going to talk about. There are plenty more, but we got to kind of get this down a little bit. Two main things: the most well-suited organisms in an environment will survive and reproduce. Okay, so that's the survival of the fittest part. That's the main thing we're going to talk about. And then number two, there must be variation in a population for evolution to occur. So in order for any change to take place in a population, there has to be differences among the individuals in that population. They can't all be identical. Okay, so the first thing, we are going to go through these 2 points here. So the first, number one. All right, so again, anything in red, write down. Okay, so you can pause it if you want, or just write as I talk. I would pause it though. So it says the most well-suited organisms and environment will survive and reproduce. These are the ones who have adaptations, okay, who have the best adaptations, in fact. So the ones who have the best adaptations are the ones who survive the best. And what an adaptation is, I really want to be specific here, is an inheritable physical or behavioral trait that makes an organism better suited to its environment than some other organism, okay? So these adaptations, I want to emphasize, are genetic. That's what inheritable means, right? They can be passed on from generation to generation. Things that are acquired during one's lifetime are not adaptations. So like if I lift a lot of weights and get really buff, that's not an adaptation. Or like if I get my ear pierced and then have a kid, my kid is not going to come out with a hole in his ear because that's not a genetic trait, right? You can't pass that on. So this cartoon kind of highlights this. So it says adaptations doesn't involve trying. This beaver is like, please chainsaw, 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 because maybe that will help him. But that wouldn't be an adaptation, and that's not how adaptations occur, right? So some other examples you can see here. White fur on polar bears, cacti have waxy skin to prevent water loss. Birds have hollow bones to roost weight for flying. So those are all adaptations that different organisms have that allow them to survive better, which will allow them to reproduce better. But you'll notice all of these ones I listed here are also genetic. Those are things that can be passed on. Those are inheritable traits, okay? So let's go on to the next slide. All right. Eventually, I do want you to draw something like this and look at it. I know it is beautiful. No, I did not draw the giraffes, but check out them trees. I made those trees in the background, so dang. Yeah, you know, I used to animate. Okay, which giraffes are best suited for this environment? Well, okay, what is the environment here? We have to look at it. And it turns out the environment that I was trying to convey is that the trees are tall and have leaves that are really high up on the trees. So a question for you here is, how will this population evolve? Okay, and so it says, remember, individuals don't evolve. So what I'm trying to say here is that a whole population is what will change over time. One individual will not change over time. So this little guy right here, poor shorty, he's not going to just like, because the trees are tall, he's not just going to grow taller and evolve himself. That's not how it works. So over time, what do you think maybe this population is going to do as a whole? Well, probably some of the shorties, they're not going to get as much to eat and will probably be less healthy, and maybe less of those shorties survive and reproduce. Some of them are going to die, and probably some of the tall ones are going to survive better, and they are going to be the ones to survive and reproduce and pass on their tall genes. And so it's possible, it's conceivable to predict that the population of these giraffes will get taller over time. Maybe the average height will get taller over time. So I want to show you what that would look like on a graph. Okay, so if you didn't, make sure you draw this so that it makes sense when we draw this graph. Okay, draw something like that. You don't have to draw 3, you could draw 2 giraffes. But... All right, so here's a graph. It says average height of giraffe population within an environment of tall trees. Okay, so let's say over here is going to be number of giraffes, and yes, we are writing this. Number of giraffes, and down here is going to be height of the giraffes. Let's say in feet. And I don't really know how tall giraffes are, but I'm just going to make up a scale. Let's say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 feet. I think that's pretty tall. 5, 10, 15. And now I'm just making a scale for number of giraffes. So let's say that's 5 giraffes, that's 10 giraffes, that's 15 giraffes, 20, 25, 30 giraffes. Okay, so let's say, and I'm just going to make this up, let's say that the average height is 15. So let's say there are 20 giraffes. So you look across, right? Look across right there. Let's say those 20 giraffes are the average, but there are also giraffes that are all these heights too. So like right here, there's 5 giraffes that are 5 foot tall, and on the other side there's also, right, because this one is the average, so obviously there are some on the other side, but as you get really tall there aren't very many, right? So 26 feet giraffe, there's only 3 of them, let's say, and these are the basketball playing giraffes. And then 5 feet giraffes, there's only 5 of them right here. So if we draw a line on this, this is called a bell curve. This would look like that, okay? Where the average is the one where there's the most of right there. Okay, so let's say that is the average in giraffe height. Now, let's say that situation from before just happened right here, where our environment has really tall leaves. That probably means some of the smaller ones are going to die. Sad. And when that happens, our average is going to shift over, right? So if some of the small ones die and the tall ones have more babies that are also tall, then the average is probably going to get bigger, right? So maybe our average shifts over a little bit. And so now, actually, let me get a different color. So now, what if the average is, I don't know, what is this, like 17 feet? So maybe now the average is 17 feet. And there are still giraffes of all sizes in this new population. So it'll still look like this curve. On the more extreme ends, you have less of them, okay? But we can still draw another thing here. Okay, so our average shifted from 15 to 17 feet. And so what I'm trying to convey here, remember, is that populations are the things that are changing, not individuals. So populations evolve, but not individuals. It would be like I said before, this short one just being like, please get taller, or like putting like some long neck braces or something to hopefully make his neck get longer, or like this beaver being like, get longer teeth or stronger teeth, I don't know, or a chainsaw, okay? So individuals don't evolve, populations evolve, okay? So make sure you have this, and then this right here is the kind of the overall takeaway from this graph, okay? All right, next thing. Just a term that I want to introduce, okay? So fitness, when we say survival of the fittest, fitness does not mean physical fitness. It does not always mean physical fitness. It is just the ability to successfully pass on its genes to its offspring. So it really, fitness is just like how well does it survive and reproduce. So fit, best adapted to a particular environment, this is really key. All fitness depends on the environment that the thing is in, okay? So when I say it's not the same as physical fitness, it's not always, right? Maybe like the fastest zebra is gonna escape better from a lion, so like fast is actually the best adaptation, but fitness could also be something like camouflage, right? So I'm gonna have you guys watch this video about these mice, which is really, really interesting and really simple evolution. But the different colored mice one is going to be able to survive better than the other, and that's not physical fitness, right? Like one isn't like better in shape than the other one, but one is more fit because it is more camouflaged with its background, as you guys will find out. So, cool. I think we got that. We think we got fitness. Let's move on to the second point here. All right, number 2 from the list from the beginning. There must be variation in a population for evolution to occur. So variation means differences, right? A population can't all be identical or it won't change at all, right? Because none of these giraffes, let's say we're talking about these giraffes, if they're all identical, do any of them have more of an advantage over another to survive and reproduce? No, not if they're identical, right? Just by chance, some will survive better than others, but if they're identical, they're going to pass on identical genes, okay? So here, I want to talk about this question here, where does variation come from? Because that's a pretty important thing. So we have 2 types of reproduction, sexual reproduction and then asexual reproduction, right? And so, there we go. And so in sexual reproduction, what's happening obviously is that you need an egg and a sperm, and they come together to make a baby. And so just because we have so many different combinations of eggs and sperm that can come together and make different babies, obviously, that is going to cause variation in the population. So we can say sexual reproduction. Now, it would seem that asexual reproduction is always going to produce identical individuals, right? Because all of these guys are doing is they are copying their DNA and then they're dividing and then they become this one, and these 2 should be identical to the first one. And if that were always true and they always copied the DNA correctly and never made any mistakes, then all of these guys, they would always be identical, and these populations of bacteria would not evolve. But it turns out that's not true, because there is another thing that is causing variation in this population of bacteria, and that is mutations. So when this thing mutates its DNA, when it copies its DNA and it has 2 copies of DNA, so one is over here, and then one, I'll get a different color, let's say is over here and it's mutated. Well, now this copy of DNA is going to go to here, and then it's going to get passed on to all of these. So all of these guys, okay, now these 4 at the bottom, are going to be different from the original. So these ones are mutated. They have slightly different DNA. And over here, these ones are going to be identical to the original cell. So that means this population of bacteria isn't actually all identical, even though it reproduces by asexual reproduction. So another thing we can write up here is mutation. That's another way that variation occurs. And sorry, I skipped one, but the last thing itself is here, that variation comes from, is the act of meiosis. So meiosis, remember, is creation of the egg and creation of the sperm. We have like these 2 divisions, it divides twice, like this. Anyway, this is meiosis. And we make tons of different eggs and sperm that have different DNA in them. Obviously, and you should know that, because if your parents only made one type of egg and sperm, then you and all of your siblings would be the same every single time your parents had a baby. So that doesn't make sense. So we all make different eggs and sperm so we can have different siblings, which creates variation in the population. So, all right, guys, make sure you get that question down and those answers, okay? All right, last thing I have for you here is to answer these 2 questions at the end of your notes, please. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.